So, we've made it at last. It's been a fantastic title battle from the very first round in Bahrain, and now, with just one race remaining, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen lie equal on points going into the... Hold on, I've got the wrong script open here, haven't I? 2023, here we go. Thank this is over. 2023 has been a year for Formula 1. Okay, it had a championship fight about as sentient as Stephen Hawking, but nevertheless, we've witnessed history in the making this year. The dominance from Verstappen and Red Bull has been like nothing we've seen before, and as predictable as the action has been at times, there have still been some moments, just don't ask me to list any of them. Jokes aside, we've got one more race to cover this season, and it's the one none of us have been looking forward to, so let's not waste any more time and get into the comedy review for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So for one last time this season, let's kick things off with the news. And quite frankly, it's a shock we've even made it to the United Arab Emirates, given we're only a week past Vegas and the Israel-Palestine conflict almost stopped the event going ahead completely. You know, I didn't think there were any positives of war, and you know what? There still aren't. The jet lag from Vegas was very much a real thing, however, with illness rife amongst the paddock, and even teams like Alfa Romeo too lazy to get rid of their playing card livery from the last race meeting. Some people had been busy though, one of which being house boss Gunther Steiner. Sweary Man had been reported to being in talks with CBS for a workplace fictional comedy show, which confused me as I thought he was already doing that with Drive to Survive. There really wasn't a lot of other stories heading into this week, which I guess is why we all ended up turning to the Daily Mail and Christian Horner. Jerry Halliwell's side bitch was allowed to open his mouth in the last week, claiming that #Blessed had contacted the Red Bull outfit, expressing interest in the drive for next season. Lewis Hamilton, who of course later agreed to remain with his sinking ship for another 2 years, said that such claims were utterly rubbish, prompting Helmut Marko to break out of his care home, but we don't listen to him anyway. If you want my thoughts, which you probably don't, but tough, here you go, there's likely a bit of truth to both sides of the story. Hamilton would have wanted some leverage in his talks with Mercedes, and so really it shouldn't have come as much of a surprise that he might express some interest in and around the paddock. Meanwhile, Horner and Red Bull have probably over-exaggerated it, but let's be honest, giving DTS fans heart failure is about as easy as stealing money from a sleeping homeless man. Let's just leave it at that. Finally in the news, McLaren and Mercedes revealed that they had renewed their partnership until the end of 2030. Right, since you care about that about as much as I did, let's get into FP1, which admittedly looked a little different ahead of the final race of the season. Clearly teams have forgotten the rule introduced last season that stated 2 rookies had to be running free practice sessions over the course of the year. That meant we saw 10 newbies take to the track on Friday morning, including 2 at Red Bull. One of these was vacuum cleaner world champion Jake Dennis, who had to immediately return to the pits after the forces exerted by Max Verstappen's Red Bull nearly ripped his f***ing head off. Still, that's not the first time that car's tried. Despite the influx in F2 talent, everyone was more or less well behaved in FP1. That said, Lance Stroll and Logan Sargent ensured they all got the complete experience. The Mercedes of George Russell would top the session, from Drugovich and Ricciardo, which just about tells you how representative it all was. Anyway, as Felipe was fired for being faster than Stroll, we can head over to FP2 to see if the experienced hands of all 20 Formula 1 drivers can give us a bit of a better idea who has the pace. How did you guess this was about to be a complete and utter show? The first red flag was brought out by Carlos Sainz when his Ferrari hit a bump at turn 2. Oh yeah, that means we need one of these, don't we? When the mashed Ferrari was cleared away, we could go practicing again. Though not for long, as Nico Hülkenberg tested his post-Grand Prix donuts, but got it a bit wrong when he reared his Haas into the wall. That said, given their current package, this was probably an aerodynamic improvement. Anyway, here we go again. With me wishing I'd never made the red flag meme in the first place, and the grid wishing they could get a lap in without someone else finding the wall, we tried going green once again. However, world champion Max Verstappen didn't seem too pleased at the pace at which everyone was leaving the pit lane, deciding he'd just pass them and nearly send a cameraman to the Paralympics in the process. The FIA would ban these overtakes after the session, and I'll be honest, I feel a bit bad for the Dutchman here, as besides Leclerc in turn 1, this is probably the only overtaking he gets to do all weekend. Anyway, the disrupted Friday would end with Leclerc in P1. Now let's move on to Saturday. FP3 happened, I guess. George Russell once again topped the session, with the McLarens not too far behind. The Papaya cars had a new livery on show for the last race of the season, designed by a Saudi artist who wanted to promote awareness to his hearing difficulties. From the look of the car, I'm starting to wonder if he was going blind as well. Carlos Sainz was back on circuit following his shunt in FP2. However, the Spaniard couldn't hook a lap together and ended the session in P20. At least this wasn't qualifying, though when that came around later that evening, it turned out Carlos really was that as he was eliminated in Q1. Things could have been even worse for the Ferrari man, as even the Williams cars looked to have pace early in the session. Logan Sargent was especially quick, though when you exceed track limits, that'll happen, I guess. The American's Q1 exit meant Alex Albon had now outqualified his teammate at every round in 2023. The first time this has happened since Max Verstappen achieved the feat in 2020 against Alex Albon. I guess this means in a few years we'll be looking at Logan Sargent proving to be the master of qualifying. Nah, who'll be kidding with that one? We'd lose another big name in Q2, as Lewis Hamilton forgot to hashtag bless his Mercedes and could only muster 11th on the grid for Sunday. Lewis then proceeded to do what all the greats have done and blame it completely on the car. As we approach the top 10 shootout, we might as well speak about Red Bull. They've been nowhere up to now, to the point where even Helmut Marko had placed a bet with Christian Horner over their chances of reaching the front row. That wouldn't happen for Checo, of course. He continued his so-called late-season resurgence by qualifying in 9th. Verstappen, meanwhile, looked untouchable as the Dutch Messiah took his 12th pole on the year. Max's closest challengers seemed to be the two McLarens, until Norris tried out the Latifi line through the final sector. That opened the door for Charles Leclerc, the Monegasque sneaking onto the front row, which will probably mean nothing for Sunday's race, but hey, let's see. The 5 lights would go out and Max Verstappen would win the last race of the season. Alright, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in 2024. Alright, as much as I would love to do that for real, let's just see if we can find anything to talk about in this one. Verstappen's start actually wasn't too great, but the Abu Dhabi grid is about as allowing for drivers to dive down the inside of turn 1 as the country is allowing of women's rights. That didn't stop Leclerc having a go at the end of the DRS straight on the first lap, though when Max was able to defend this attack, we all knew how this race was going to pan out. Behind the leading pair was the McLaren of Oscar Piastri, though the Australian clearly didn't want to be there as he plummeted like a stone in the early phases of the race. Fortunes were slightly different for George Russell meanwhile, the Mercedes showing some rare pace in the dying moments of the season. This was particularly important in their battle with Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. I've not mentioned that up to now, mainly because I knew I was going to need something to fill time during the race. As things stood, the Scuderia would clinch P2, but unfortunately we've got 48 laps before this sleep therapy session is over. Russell was able to pass Piastri on track, and then snatched 3rd from Norris when McLaren's pit crew also fell asleep during the Britain's pit stop. Lewis Hamilton meanwhile was busy fondling Frenchman again as he gave Pierre Gasly an unexpected prostate exam which damaged his front wing. We'll keep with the F1 highlights now and skip about 20 laps as literally nothing happened. Dr. Hamilton nearly inspected the second butthole when Alonso brake tested the 7-time champion at his favourite corner from 2021. Fernando clearly wanted hashtag blessed to lose his DRS, but his grand plan backfired when the Mercedes cruised past and up the road. The other driver making up ground was Sergio Perez. He'd been doing a decent job up to now, until he made contact with the McLaren of Norris on lap 47. I assumed this would be a racing incident, though the stewards had other plans, joining Hamilton in the butt-f***ing as they handed the Mexican with a 5-second penalty. This would turn out to be a blessing for George Russell and Mercedes, who needed to stay in 3rd to secure P2 for the team and the constructors. Ferrari, of course, were staring gormlessly at the situation, unaware of what to do, leading to Charles Leclerc activating his singular brain cell to let Sergio by and hold the Mercedes up on the final lap. As clever as this strategy was, it was in vain for the prancing horses. Sergio crossed the line 2nd, though would drop back to 4th with his penalty, and hand P2 over to the Silver Arrows. Max Verstappen, meanwhile, would already be celebrating at this point, having taken home his 19th win of 2023 in what has been an utterly dominant season. I've said it before and I'll say it again, hats off to Red Bull this year. They've knocked it out the park and have fully deserved all the success that's come their way. In the nicest possible way though, can at least one of the 9 other teams get their bloody arse in gear for 2024, because I won't lie, I don't think I can go through this 2 years in succession. I hope the comedy reviews have at least relieved some of you of the more mind-numbingly boring segments of this year's championship, and I'd like to take the time now to thank everyone who's watched, liked and subscribed to the channel over the last year, which has been a mega one, I can't lie. We've crossed 100,000 subscribers and had the opportunity to attend some of the races in person this season, which quite frankly has been a dream come true, and none of it would ever have been possible without all of you watching. So once again, thank you. The videos will of course continue as I find something to talk about over the off season, so don't think I'm going anywhere. And when the comedy review does return for 2024, I have some big changes planned, though I'll shut up for now as I have no clue if I'll be able to get them done in time for February. A final cheers goes out to all my patrons and channel members who help support me and make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join in on that, then you can head to the links in the description down below. For now though, that's all from me, so I'll see you very soon for another video, but until then, have a good one.